It's like 3 projects all at once. Number 1 was this photo project I'm working on. I'm kind of returning back to my photography practice in a very traditional sense. I'm doing this photography project on the lived experiences of LGBTQ people in the Anglophone Caribbean in particular, and I kind of specify the Anglophone just due to like that very specific colonial history that kind of produces homophobia in different ways in different islands, but also talking about how we generate resistance to that and how it comes directly from that legacy. But I'm thinking a lot about with this series about making collaborative portraiture with people over a period of time, where I'm trying to engineer like a shift away from the emphasis on the consumption of the body, because the reality of the situation is that I don't live in the Caribbean full time anymore. I'm here for like maybe 6 months a year, half and half. I try to split it, and the reality is due to not having a lot of exhibition spaces. As much as I would love for this work, to be shown here in the Caribbean, it's tricky to even pin it down. So you're just talking to participants and I'm saying, well, right straight up and saying, well, the reality of the situation is that this may not be shown here first as much as I would like it to. How do you feel about that? So we're talking about visibility and collaboration over a still image over a period of time, essentially, and the implications of what this consumption means. So just having that conversation back and forth with people, because there's always this fixation on photographing queer people in the Caribbean by people in the West, and it's a whole mess, because then you go find the Gully Queens and it's a situation, and you give them some Balenciaga to wear and the show done. They don't get no tangible benefits, they're still living down there, they're still ostracized, they still don't have no work. And that happens so many times over and over in the Caribbean, this strange gaze. It even happens within like the Caribbean diaspora to people who live there. It's very fantastical. So working with people, I'm trying to come up with portraits that they think are most representative of themselves. So it's really, like I said, a shift away from the body in some regards, where people can choose to like, let's work together and make a still life. Like if queerness for you is a communal action, let's make it with a friend. How do I protect you, your autonomy, and how do I protect you in general here while we're here? Because you have to stay here, and I'm not staying here. So trying to negotiating all like the intersections of queerness and diaspora at once. The second one is this video project that is like the end of a trilogy of works that I'm doing. This last one is called Artifact 3, Terra Nudis, and it is essentially the first two projects were both based on my mother and my grandmother, and both of them have been kind of characterized by being reactions to migration in a sense, migration and kind of finding migration and a centering of memory around communal objects. So the first one, like my mom, I told you, but my mom basically ended up staying in Trinidad after I was born, after my younger brother was born. I was 3, and I grew up in Trinidad from 3 to 17, and then I moved to the States for school, and then eventually I asked her, well, girl, let me figure out this green card situation so I can file for you, so you could come up for graduation. But then it was a whole thing where she kind of has to confess that my father has a green card and she can't actually come up. And looking at how, well, it kind of recontextualized my whole childhood essentially. And I grew up in my grandmother's house, and a lot of our family memories are kind of centered around this bureau. There's images like stuck in the walls with pins, and a lot of how we conceptualize ourselves are in that place. But also the bureau is a place where you hide things. So, there's so many family secrets that are kind of like tumbling out very, very slowly now over time. And so I've kind of used this video piece to kind of illustrate that. And then the second one in general was about my grandmother, and it's a lot more removed because our relationship has become a lot more, it's been disintegrating a little bit over time due to rifts in family, disagreements, things like that. So I realized that she's the gatekeeper of a lot of family memories and a lot of ancestral knowledge. She knows things that we don't know, and she probably will not share because she doesn't think it's beneficial. And so considering these things and my frustration with these things as I grow closer, trying to figure out exactly what is my lineage, and knowing that that is a brick wall that I probably will not even be able to, get past. I kind of channeled my frustration with that situation into this installation piece that is a series of transparencies from a book of crossword puzzles I made about our relationship. So I made a whole, I made like maybe 11 to 12 crossword puzzles that highlight our relationship and how I feel about it. And they're kind of backed by these archival images from the first one, so they kind of carry over. But it's done on transparency so that you can project these puzzles. You can shuffle through them, you can pick and pull, and you could use permanent marker to actually sit in the gallery and work out these puzzles at the same time. But what happens is, because it's so big on one side but it's also so small on one scale, it's often best done with a friend, so it's another kind of communal action again to like pass through these memories. And because of the scaling of it, you tend to end up focusing a lot more on the spaces in between words and on the images and themselves, and you start focusing on objects and small fragments of people, and you start recalling. It's kind of relatable, and I find like people from the Caribbean diaspora really get into it a lot more than most people, because it's just made for them. This last one kind of considers, well, where family has failed in the previous iterations. I mean, it's definitely a success story in there, but the reality of the situation is that there's also, like a really heavy inheritance that comes with that. So I'm looking in this last one as I'm using the technique of scrying, which is a method of gazing into the past, present, or future by spiritual practitioners, often in African tradition as well. To see in the past, present, or future, to gain insight, essentially. So what I'm using is like this wash tub, and I'm coming up with my own, generating my own perceived questions about future and family and lineage, and where we can amend to probably learn from things that happened in the past 2 iterations, and projecting this constructed future into this wash pan. So it's a whole installation that I'm working on with footage that I did over the summer while I was at school here. I didn't shoot any new footage here, but I needed this time to figure out exactly who I'm talking to and to recenter what is important to this narrative, essentially. I don't think I could have ever finished it anyway, but in Caribbean, to be honest. And then the last thing I was doing was the Wikipedia workshops that I did in collaboration with Black Lunch Table. Black Lunch Table is a organization that focuses on helping people to learn the ins and outs of Wikipedia so that they can create more editors on Wikipedia who are people of color or black, so that they can author their own stories and kind of fill this kind of information gap that Wikipedia has, by specifically editing articles that pertain to the lives and works of artists of the African diaspora. So while I've been here, I did 3 workshops on that. Trained a bunch of new editors on the ins and outs of Wikipedia, because really there's a lot of politics on there and people don't know that they have power in that. But yeah. After I leave here, I'm going back to Trinidad for 3 months. So I'm going to week in New York and then going back to Trinidad for 3 months. Mostly because I want to continue this photo project I'm doing, but also I just need to reset. I think it's becoming increasingly important to me that I find time to be at home to recenter. Eventually in my best life I would be moving back full time, but I'm working towards setting up infrastructure so people would come find me in the Caribbean and find all these other artists that you were sleeping on because you're too lazy to do the curatorial research. So that's part of me just restructuring what home fits in, how home fits into my practice. And then after that, I am doing Red Bull in Detroit. So I'm moving to Detroit for 3 months at the end of April to be artist in residence there with Red Bull. That is interesting. Let's see where that goes. It's definitely a residency first for me. I'm trying to try a bunch of different residency formats because ultimately one of my goals is to my 10 years time to start my own residency in Trinidad. So I'm looking at different models and how they work and what doesn't work, and funding streams and why that doesn't work at all, and looking at how we could fund things like that communally, make it happen without, it's that whole thing about equity again, coming back around. So that's part of my research for that. I'm still fleshing out exactly what I'm going to do there, but I do have some dregs of ideas starting to kind of make form. And then in September, grad school. Don't know where yet. Waiting for results, waiting to hear about that, but applications are in. Hopefully somebody takes me somewhere. Okay, my name is Kearra Amaya Gopee. I am a Trinidadian photographer and visual artist who lives in New York, but goes back and forth.
Was that